You are lying still, perhaps in the soft half-light of evening, and the world feels calm. The ground beneath you seems solid, unmoving, dependable. Yet even in this stillness, the earth is not quiet. It never is. Deep below your body, far beyond what your senses can reach, the planet is alive with motion. Not the dramatic motion of earthquakes and ruptures, but something subtler. Tiny shifts ripple through layers of rock. Mineral grains press, release, and press again. These movements are so small they escape your awareness entirely, yet they are constant, like breath. You begin to imagine the earth as a listener as well as a speaker. Before it ever raises its voice, before it cracks or shakes, it murmurs. The night air holds this idea gently, that change announces itself long before it arrives. When you think of earthquakes, you may picture sudden chaos, a sharp interruption. But the story truly begins much earlier. Long before the ground moves enough to be felt, stress builds quietly. Tectonic plates drift, slow as growing fingernails. They do not collide with violence at first. They lean into one another, pressing over years, decades, centuries. This pressure does not remain silent. It sends faint signals outward, delicate and easily missed. The earth does not hide what it is becoming, it simply speaks softly. You are used to listening for loud things. A ringing phone. A warning siren. A sudden noise in the dark. But tonight, you are invited to consider a different kind of listening. The kind that requires patience. Science, in this story, does not arrive with urgency or fear. It does not rush in to shout predictions. It arrives like a careful guest, removing its shoes, lowering its voice. It sits beside the earth and listens. Modern science has learned something ancient in spirit, that information often lives in quiet places. Before an earthquake begins, the ground experiences microscopic changes. Rocks stretch by distances smaller than a human hair. Gravity shifts ever so slightly as mass redistributes underground. Vibrations ripple through stone, too gentle for your body to detect. These signals do not mean disaster. They mean process. They are the earth thinking, adjusting, negotiating with itself. You might imagine placing your ear against the planet, as one might listen to a seashell. At first, there is only silence. Then, slowly, patterns emerge. A faint hum. A rhythm. Listening like this requires tools more sensitive than human senses. It requires instruments that do not demand loudness to register meaning. In this quiet partnership between earth and science, the goal is not control. It is understanding. As you breathe slowly, you begin to sense how this kind of listening mirrors your own body. Your heart does not suddenly leap from calm to panic without transition. Your breath does not stop without subtle signals first. Tiny changes come before obvious ones. The earth is no different. For most of human history, earthquakes felt sudden because we could only notice the final moment. The sharp release. The dramatic movement. Everything before that was invisible. But invisibility is not absence. It simply means something is happening below the threshold of perception. Tonight, you allow that idea to settle in gently. The ground beneath you is active, but not threatening. It is expressive in a language that favors patience over volume. Science learns to listen to this language by focusing on precision rather than force. Not by drilling deeper or shouting louder, but by becoming quieter itself. By building sensors that notice what barely changes. This approach transforms the relationship between humans and the Earth. Instead of reacting to disasters, we begin to observe preparation. Instead of fearing suddenness, we learn to recognize gradualness. You may feel a soft comfort in this shift. Not because danger disappears, but because awareness grows. Listening does not prevent every event, but it changes how events are experienced. Surprise becomes familiarity. Fear softens into readiness. As the night deepens, you imagine the planet beneath cities, mountains, and oceans. Always moving. Always communicating. Never truly silent. The Earth does not wait for attention. It speaks regardless. The question is whether anyone is listening. This chapter is not about prediction. It is about presence. About noticing that even the most solid things are alive with subtle motion. As you rest, the idea drifts through your mind like a lullaby, that before the Earth ever shakes, it listens to itself. And now, slowly, humans are learning to do the same. Yet listening is only the first step. To truly understand these whispers, one must learn their patterns, their rhythms, their meanings. Because beneath this quiet lies a language of vibrations, endlessly flowing, waiting to be followed. You remain still, letting the idea of listening settle deeper into you. Now that you know the Earth is always moving, you begin to wonder how it speaks. Not in words, and not in sudden sounds, but in vibrations. Gentle, persistent, endlessly traveling vibrations. Everything that exists vibrates in some way. Your breath creates small movements in air. Your heartbeat sends waves through your chest. Even when you feel completely at rest, motion continues quietly. The Earth communicates like this too. Through tremors so small they never reach the surface as shaking. Through waves that slide through rock like slow tides through sand. These are not earthquakes. They are conversations. You imagine vibrations as ripples spreading across a pond at night. A single drop falls, and circles move outward, touching everything in their path. Some ripples are strong. Others fade almost immediately. But all of them carry information about where they began. Deep underground, stresses shift constantly. Plates press together. Faults resist and bend. Each adjustment sends out tiny signals, moving through stone in all directions. These signals overlap, interfere, soften, and repeat. To your body, the ground feels solid and unmoving. But solidity is an illusion created by scale. On the scale of atoms and crystals, rock behaves more like a slow, stubborn fluid. It flexes. It responds. It vibrates. The Earth does not send warnings the way machines do. There is no alarm bell, no single sound that means danger. Instead, there is a gradual change in rhythm. Patterns shift. Frequencies drift. Vibration is not a threat. It is a record. Each wave carries a history of pressure, direction, and resistance. It tells a story about what the Earth is experiencing in that moment. When stress builds, vibrations subtly change their character. They may travel slightly faster or slower. They may scatter differently through fractured rock. You begin to understand that the Earth's language is not about volume. It is about nuance. For centuries, humans could only hear the loudest parts of this language. The crashing sentence at the end of a long paragraph. The sudden punctuation mark of an earthquake. Everything before that remained unread. But modern listening changes the scale of attention. Instead of waiting for dramatic motion, science listens for the smallest ones. Vibrations smaller than a grain of dust shifting. Movements shorter than a blink of time. You imagine sensors resting quietly in the ground, doing nothing visible. They do not shake or buzz. They simply notice. These instruments are tuned not for strength, but for sensitivity. They pay attention to how waves pass through rock, not how hard they hit. A subtle difference in vibration can reveal changes in stress far below. This is not prediction in the dramatic sense. It is translation. The Earth speaks continuously, and these sensors learn its accent. They learn how vibrations behave when the planet is calm. They learn how those same vibrations change when pressure grows. Listening becomes comparison. Now versus before. This pattern versus that one. You might think of it like recognizing a familiar voice. You do not need someone to shout to know something is different. A pause. A hesitation. A slight change in tone. The Earth's vibrations carry these same subtle cues. As you rest, you feel how comforting this idea can be. That the planet does not hide its intentions. That it expresses itself gradually, long before any sudden event. There is patience in this process. Vibrations move at their own pace, shaped by the material they pass through. Dense rock slows them. Fractured layers scatter them. Each journey reveals something about the path itself. In this way, vibrations become maps. They outline hidden faults, underground structures, and zones of tension. Without digging or breaking, listening alone reveals what lies beneath. The Earth does not resist being known. It simply requires careful attention. You sense that fear fades when understanding grows. Vibrations stop being mysterious signals of danger. They become familiar rhythms of a living planet. Even now, as you lie still, vibrations pass beneath you. From ocean waves striking distant shores. From winds pressing against mountains. From tectonic plates inching forward in silence. Most of these signals will never become earthquakes. They are part of the Earth's normal breathing. But among them are patterns that matter. Changes that suggest stress accumulating. Moments when the rhythm tightens. To notice these moments, one must listen deeply. Not with urgency. Not with fear. But with trust in patterns and time. This chapter ends with a realization settling softly in your mind. The Earth is always speaking, and vibrations are its chosen words. To understand what comes next, listening must grow even quieter, reaching into realms smaller than vibration itself, where stillness becomes something that can be measured. You begin this chapter by letting the world shrink. Not in importance, but in scale. Your attention moves inward, downward, into spaces too small for intuition. Here, quiet does not mean nothing is happening. It means something delicate is unfolding. In the quantum world, stillness is never empty. Atoms vibrate even at their calmest. Particles exist as possibilities as much as positions. What seems motionless is actually balanced, gently alive with uncertainty. You imagine standing at the edge of silence and discovering it has texture. A faint shimmer. A quiet hum. Not noise, but presence. This is where quantum sensing begins. Not with force or intrusion, but with respect for smallness. It listens to the tiniest shifts imaginable. Shifts so small that classical instruments pass right over them. Quantum sensors do not try to overpower nature. They align themselves with it. They use atoms, light, and fundamental constants as references. Things that remain steady even when everything else drifts. You picture a single atom suspended gently, isolated from disturbance. It behaves predictably, not because it is simple, but because it is faithful to the laws of the universe. Its energy levels are precise. Its transitions reliable. When the environment changes, even slightly, the atom notices. A faint pull of gravity. A tiny vibration passing through space. A subtle shift in time itself. The atom responds, not dramatically, but honestly. Its behavior changes just enough to be measured. This is the heart of quantum sensing. Using the certainty of the very small to detect changes in the very large. You let that idea settle like a soft blanket. That atoms can become witnesses. That the smallest things can tell stories about massive systems. Quantum sensors often rely on superposition, a state where particles exist in more than one possibility at once. This sounds strange, but you can imagine it as listening with both ears and both eyes at the same time. More perspectives. More sensitivity. In this state, atoms become extraordinarily responsive. They notice differences that would otherwise cancel out. They feel changes in motion, gravity, and vibration with exquisite care. You realize that measurement here is not about pinning something down. It is about allowing variation to reveal itself. Traditional sensors wait for strong signals. Quantum sensors notice the beginnings. They detect how long it takes an atom to complete a rhythm. How light waves interfere with one another. How probabilities shift ever so slightly. Time becomes elastic in this space. A clock is no longer just a device on a wall. It is a conversation between energy and rhythm. Atomic clocks, among the most precise instruments ever made, can detect changes in gravity simply by ticking differently. When gravity grows stronger, time slows. Not enough for you to feel, but enough for atoms to notice. This means that if the Earth's mass shifts underground, time itself changes locally. Just a little. Just enough. Quantum sensors feel this change like a deep, slow breath. You begin to sense how this connects back to the Earth. Stress builds underground. Rocks compress. Density changes. Gravity shifts almost imperceptibly. These changes do not shake the ground. They bend reality softly. Quantum sensors listen for that bend. They sit quietly, often motionless, allowing atoms to do what they naturally do. No rushing. No forcing. Just observation. This patience is what makes quantum sensing powerful. It waits long enough to notice patterns. It notices consistency before disruption. In this way, The quantum world becomes a translator between silence and meaning. You feel a gentle awe at this partnership. That humanity has learned to listen by becoming quieter itself. That progress sometimes means slowing down. Quantum sensing does not eliminate uncertainty. It works with it. It uses uncertainty as a source of information rather than a flaw. This mirrors the Earth's behavior. Nothing underground happens instantly. Everything emerges from gradual imbalance. As you drift deeper into relaxation, you sense how fitting this is. That bedtime is also a kind of quantum state. You are not fully awake, not fully asleep, balanced between possibilities. In this state, subtle thoughts rise and fall. Small sensations matter more. Stillness becomes vivid. Quantum sensors exist in a similar in-between place. Sensitive because they are balanced. Informative because they are calm. You realize that measuring the nearly impossible is not about heroics. It is about humility. About trusting that the universe reveals itself when given space. The Earth whispers. Atoms listen. Science waits. And as this chapter draws to a close, one idea lingers gently in your mind. If atoms can keep time with such devotion, then perhaps time itself can become a guide, quietly revealing how the Earth moves long before it ever stirs. You enter this chapter slowly, as if stepping into a room where time itself is breathing. Not ticking loudly, not rushing forward, but resting in a steady, patient rhythm. Here, time is not something you chase. It is something you listen to. At the smallest scales of existence, time reveals a surprising gentleness. Atoms behave like quiet keepers of rhythm, repeating the same motions with extraordinary loyalty. They do not tire. They do not hurry. They simply are. An atom vibrates at a frequency set by the universe itself. No matter where it exists, no matter what surrounds it, that rhythm remains the same. This reliability makes atoms perfect timekeepers. Not because they measure seconds, but because they embody consistency. You imagine each atom as a tiny lantern, pulsing softly in the dark. Each pulse identical to the last. Each moment following another without urgency. Atomic clocks are built upon this devotion to sameness. They count time not by gears or springs, but by listening to atoms change energy states. When an atom absorbs or releases energy, it does so at an exact frequency. That frequency becomes a heartbeat for time itself. These clocks are so precise that they can detect differences you would never feel. A clock placed slightly higher than another will tick faster. Not because it is broken, but because gravity is weaker there. This is one of the quiet truths of the universe. Gravity and time are intertwined. Where gravity is stronger, time slows. Where gravity eases, time flows more freely. You let that idea settle gently. That time is not fixed. That it stretches and compresses in response to mass and motion, like fabric responding to weight. Now you begin to sense how this connects to the earth beneath you. As tectonic plates press together, rock compresses. Density increases. Mass subtly redistributes underground. These changes are far too small for your body to feel. But time feels them. An atomic clock resting near a fault line may tick differently as stress builds below. not enough to notice without careful comparison, but enough to be real. This is how time becomes a sensor, not by predicting events, but by reflecting conditions. You imagine two identical clocks, placed miles apart. At first, they agree perfectly. Their rhythms align. Their pulses match. Then, slowly, one begins to drift. Not because it fails, but because the earth beneath it changes. This drift is not dramatic. It is almost tender. A difference measured in billionths of a second. Yet within that difference lies a story. Time notices when the ground tightens. It notices when mass shifts. It notices when gravity deepens ever so slightly. In this way, atomic clocks become listeners. They do not ask questions. They simply respond honestly to their environment. You feel comfort in this honesty. There is no interpretation yet. Only observation. Precision here is not sharp or aggressive. It is calm. It rests in repetition. Atomic clocks must be protected from noise to remain faithful. From temperature changes. From vibrations. From interference. This careful isolation allows them to hear the smallest influences. Like a person closing their eyes to listen more deeply, you begin to see how this mirrors the entire theme of listening. To hear subtle change, one must create stillness. Timekeeping at this level becomes a meditation. A steady focus on what does not change, so that what does can be noticed. As the earth slowly strains along its fault lines, time responds without judgment. It neither warns nor alarms. It simply adjusts. These adjustments, when observed across networks of clocks, form patterns. Time stretches here. Time relaxes there. Together, these patterns reveal invisible processes unfolding underground. You sense the elegance of this approach. No drilling. No disruption. Only presence. Time, once thought to be abstract and distant, becomes intimate. It rests inside atoms. It moves with gravity. It responds to the Earth's quiet preparations. As you breathe evenly, you feel how this understanding slows your thoughts. There is no rush to conclusions. No need for certainty. Only the awareness that something profound is always unfolding beneath the surface. Atomic clocks do not predict earthquakes. They do not announce outcomes. They reveal conditions. They tell us how the earth is feeling, not what it will do. And that distinction matters. It replaces fear with curiosity, urgency with patience. As this chapter draws toward rest, one final idea drifts into your awareness. If time can feel gravity shifting beneath the earth, then perhaps gravity itself carries a fingerprint, faint but persistent, waiting to be noticed next. You begin by letting go of the idea of gravity as something heavy. Tonight, gravity is not a force that pulls you downward. It is something softer. Something closer to a presence than a push. Gravity is the reason you feel held as you lie still. Not pressed, not trapped, but gently anchored. It curves space around you like a quiet hand resting on your back. In physics, gravity is not truly a pull at all. It is the bending of space and time caused by mass. The earth does not tug at you. It shapes the path you naturally follow. You imagine space as a smooth fabric, stretched gently across the universe. Where the Earth rests, that fabric dips slightly. You move along the curve, not because you are forced, but because the path bends. This bending is usually constant, reliable, comforting. But the Earth is not perfectly still. Its mass shifts continuously. Water moves through oceans and underground aquifers. Air circulates in slow, planetary breaths. Rock deep below compresses and relaxes under pressure. Each movement alters gravity just a little. So little that you never feel it. So little that for centuries, no instrument could detect it. Yet these tiny changes matter. As tectonic stress builds, rock becomes denser in some regions. Faults lock, resisting motion. Mass subtly redistributes underground. This redistribution changes the shape of gravity's curve. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but measurably. You begin to sense gravity not as a constant, but as a field that breathes. Expanding here, tightening there. Quantum sensors are designed to feel this breath. They do not measure weight the way a scale does. They measure how gravity changes across space and time. Some use clouds of ultra-cold atoms, suspended almost motionless. These atoms fall freely under gravity, tracing its shape with exquisite accuracy. If gravity shifts, their paths shift too. Others rely on atomic clocks, feeling gravity through time itself. A stronger gravitational field slows time. A weaker one allows it to pass more quickly. These differences are unimaginably small. Billionths of a second. Fractions of a fraction. Yet within them lies information. Gravity becomes a map. Not of surface features, but of hidden mass. You imagine gravity as a fingerprint left by the Earth's interior. Each ridge, each valley, each fault line subtly shapes the field. No two places are exactly the same. When stress accumulates underground, that fingerprint changes. Slightly deeper curves. Slightly altered contours. Quantum sensors notice these changes without disturbing the Earth. They listen from the outside, attentive and patient. This approach feels respectful, as if science has learned to observe without intrusion. You feel a quiet reassurance in that. That understanding does not always require intervention. Gravity does not announce itself loudly. It does not signal danger. It simply reflects reality as it is. As pressure builds underground, gravity does not lie. It records the change faithfully. Most of the time, these shifts resolve without incident. Stress redistributes. Rock relaxes. Nothing dramatic occurs. But sometimes, pressure continues to build. Faults resist longer. Energy accumulates. Gravity responds throughout this process. Always present. Always honest. By tracking gravity's soft changes over time, scientists can observe how the Earth evolves internally. Not to predict exact moments, but to understand conditions. This understanding changes the relationship between humans and earthquakes. The Earth is no longer a silent threat. It becomes a system expressing its state continuously. You sense how this knowledge softens fear. Because fear often comes from suddenness. From not knowing. Gravity offers continuity. A steady stream of information, flowing even in silence. As you breathe slowly, you imagine gravity wrapping around the planet like a second skin. Always touching. Always responding. Quantum sensors sit quietly within this field. They do not chase signals. They allow signals to come to them. This patience aligns with the pace of the Earth itself. Nothing underground happens quickly. Everything unfolds gradually, even when the final release feels sudden. Gravity feels the preparation long before the release. You may notice how calming this realization is. That the Earth does not act without context. That every event emerges from a long, detectable process. As you rest, gravity continues its silent work. Holding oceans in place. Shaping mountains. Responding to hidden shifts beneath your feet. You are part of this field too. Your body curves space just a little. Your presence matters. And as this chapter settles towards sleep, a gentle thought remains with you. If gravity can reveal where mass quietly changes, then perhaps the places where the Earth holds its breath the longest are the fault lines themselves, slowly inhaling and exhaling beneath the surface. You begin by imagining the Earth breathing. Not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, over spans of time that feel almost unreal. This breath is not air moving in and out. It is pressure. It is strain. It is the quiet act of holding and releasing. Fault lines are where this breathing becomes most intimate. They are long seams in the Earth's crust, places where massive plates meet and touch. From above, they look like lines. From within, they are zones of tension and patience. You picture two enormous slabs of rock pressed together. They want to move. They are always moving. But friction holds them in place, like hands gently resisting one another. This resistance does not stop motion. It slows it. As plates continue to drift, stress builds along the fault. The rock does not snap immediately. It bends, just slightly. Crystals shift within their lattices. Microscopic cracks open and close. This bending is elastic at first. Like stretching a muscle slowly, carefully. The rock remembers its shape, but it also remembers the strain. You sense how different this is from the suddenness people often imagine. Earthquakes feel abrupt because we experience only the release. But the preparation is long and deliberate. Fault lines inhale. They take in stress bit by bit. Year after year. Sometimes century after century. Each inhale deepens the stored energy. Each moment of stillness hides motion beneath it. Most of the time, nothing dramatic happens. The Earth holds. It adjusts. It redistributes pressure quietly. This is why fault lines can feel deceptive. They appear calm on the surface. Cities grow above them. Forests spread their roots across them. Yet beneath, the Earth is practicing patience. You imagine this practice as a long breath held gently, not forcefully. There is no urgency in it. No intent. Just physics unfolding at its natural pace. Quantum sensors and sensitive instruments learn to notice these breaths. They do not listen for shaking. They listen for strain. As stress builds, the properties of rock change slightly. It becomes stiffer in some places, more fractured in others. These changes affect how vibrations travel, how gravity curves, how time ticks. Each signal is subtle on its own. Together, they form a picture of tension. You begin to feel how fault lines are not broken places. They are active places. Dynamic boundaries where motion is negotiated rather than denied. Sometimes, faults release stress gradually. They creep. They slip so slowly that no earthquake occurs. The earth exhales gently. Other times, friction holds longer. The inhale deepens. The breath is held. The longer it is held, the more energy accumulates. You sense how this holding is not a decision. It is a balance between opposing forces. Motion pushing forward. Resistance pushing back. When resistance finally gives way, the release feels sudden. But only because the inhale was so long. Quantum sensors notice when the balance shifts. Not at the moment of release, but during the holding. They observe how rocks deform microscopically, how gravity responds to subtle compression, how vibrations scatter differently through stressed regions. These observations do not say when an earthquake will happen. They say how the earth is feeling now. Is the breath deepening? Is it easing? Is pressure redistributing elsewhere? This kind of listening replaces certainty with awareness. You feel how this mirrors your own body. When you hold tension in your shoulders or jaw, the release feels sudden. But the tension itself built slowly, often unnoticed. The earth, too, carries tension quietly. Fault lines stretch across continents and oceans. Some are shallow. Some dive deep into the crust. Each one breathes at its own pace. Each one has its own rhythm. There is no universal countdown. Only patterns. You imagine standing above a fault line at night. Nothing moves. Nothing sounds. Yet beneath your feet, rocks are leaning into one another. Pressure is being stored like a memory. Quantum sensors nearby feel this memory forming. They register the quiet tightening of space and time. This awareness does not create fear. It creates intimacy. To know that the earth is not random. That even its most dramatic moments are the result of long preparation. As you breathe slowly, you align with this rhythm. Inhale. Exhale. The earth does the same, just much more slowly. You sense how comforting it is to think of earthquakes not as surprises, but as conclusions to long, patient processes. Fault lines do not betray the land. They express it. They show where motion concentrates, where the planet negotiates its own movement. As this chapter settles toward rest, a final thought drifts gently through you. If fault lines are the places where the earth breathes most deeply, then perhaps the quiet instruments listening nearby are learning how to follow that breath out of the laboratory and into the open landscapes where people live and sleep. You begin this chapter by leaving the laboratory behind. Not abruptly, not with a closing door, but with a slow widening of space. The controlled quiet of white rooms and polished instruments softens into open air. Science does not end here. It simply steps outside. For a long time, the most sensitive listening happened only indoors. Atoms needed protection. Clocks needed isolation. Sensors needed silence. The laboratory was a sanctuary where noise was kept away. Temperature held steady. Vibrations dampened. Light carefully managed. But the Earth does not live in laboratories. Its signals move through mountains, deserts, coastlines, and cities. To truly listen, science must meet the planet where it is. This journey outward happens gently. Instruments grow quieter rather than louder, smaller rather than larger. Quantum sensors, once confined to specialized rooms, are learning how to exist in the world. They are being designed to listen amid wind, weather, and human life. Not by overpowering these influences, but by distinguishing them. You imagine a sensor resting in a valley. It does not announce itself. It does not disrupt the land. It simply remains present. Nearby, grasses move in the wind. Animals pass without noticing. The ground continues its slow negotiations below. This is what listening landscapes look like. In these places, technology no longer dominates the environment. It blends into it. Like a still stone among many stones. You sense a shift in the philosophy of science here. From control to coexistence. From isolation to integration. Instead of forcing silence, instruments learn to recognize meaningful signals within noise. Instead of eliminating disturbance, they learn its patterns. Wind has a rhythm. Rain has a signature. Human activity leaves traces that can be identified and set aside. Beneath all of this, the Earth continues its deeper conversation. Listening landscapes are often quiet places, but not empty ones. They exist near fault lines, coastlines, and plate boundaries. Places where motion concentrates. Sometimes they are remote. High plateaus. Wide deserts. Other times, they exist near cities, tucked into basements or buried beneath streets. Listening does not require distance from people. It requires discernment. You imagine a city at night. Cars pass. Lights glow. People sleep. Below it all, sensors rest quietly, feeling gravity's slight variations. Noticing time's subtle drift. Tracking vibrations too gentle for anyone to feel. The city is not aware of this listening, yet it benefits from it. This coexistence feels important. Reassuring. Science does not ask the Earth to stop being alive. It simply pays attention. Networks of sensors begin to form across landscapes. Not one instrument alone, but many, spread out like a calm awareness. Each sensor notices its local conditions. Together, they form a broader understanding. Patterns emerge not from a single point, but from relationships. How one place changes relative to another. How signals move across distance. This distributed listening mirrors the Earth itself. No single fault line acts alone. No single shift tells the whole story. Understanding arises from connection. You feel how this approach aligns with the rhythm of bedtime thought. Ideas drifting. Connecting softly. Nothing forced. In listening landscapes, data flows quietly. It does not demand immediate interpretation. It accumulates patiently. Time becomes an ally. Long-term observation reveals slow trends, seasonal changes, gradual stress accumulation, gentle releases. The Earth is allowed to show itself fully, without interruption. You sense a kind of respect in this method, as if science has learned to ask permission simply by being present. There is also humility here. No single sensor claims certainty. No single measurement claims authority. Instead, understanding grows through consistency, through repetition, through trust in patterns. Listening landscapes also bring science closer to everyday life. Earthquake sensing is no longer distant or abstract. It becomes something woven into the places people inhabit. Not as surveillance, not as control, but as awareness. This awareness does not remove uncertainty. It reframes it. Unknowns are no longer empty spaces. They are areas of attention. You feel how this changes the emotional tone of preparedness. Fear fades when observation feels continuous. Surprise softens when monitoring feels gentle and ongoing. Listening landscapes do not promise prediction. They promise presence. They allow the Earth to be heard in its own time. As the night deepens, you imagine the planet dotted with quiet listeners. Across continents, across oceans, each one patient, each one attentive. Together, they form a conversation between humanity and the Earth that does not require urgency to be meaningful. You sense how comforting it is to know that while you sleep, listening continues. Not anxiously, not urgently, just attentively. The Earth breathes. Sensors listen. People rest. This balance feels sustainable. As this chapter settles into stillness, one gentle question remains with you. If the Earth can be listened to quietly across the landscapes where life unfolds, then what changes when those whispers arrive early enough to offer not certainty, but time itself as a gift? You begin this chapter by thinking about time, not as something that runs out, but as something that opens. A small pause. A brief moment. Sometimes, that is all it takes to change how an event is experienced. Time feels different when it arrives unexpectedly. It can feel sharp, overwhelming, compressed into a single instant. But when time is offered early, even in small amounts, it stretches. It becomes space. This is the quiet promise behind early signals. Not certainty. Not control. But time. Quantum sensors do not shout warnings. They do not announce exact outcomes. They notice beginnings. A subtle shift in gravity. A slow change in vibration. A gentle drift in timekeeping. Each signal on its own is modest. Together, they form a suggestion that something is changing. You begin to understand that early signals are not about fear. They are about familiarity. When something is familiar, it no longer startles. It can be approached calmly. Imagine hearing distant thunder long before a storm arrives. The sound does not tell you exactly when rain will fall, but it prepares you. You close a window. You pause a walk. You adjust. Early earthquake signals work in a similar way. They do not predict the moment of shaking. They reveal conditions that make shaking more likely. This difference matters deeply. Prediction demands certainty. Early awareness invites readiness. Quantum sensors are especially suited for this role because they operate continuously. They do not wait for dramatic events. They listen through quiet periods, gathering context. This context is what gives early signals meaning. A sudden vibration without history is confusing. A gradual change observed over time becomes informative. You sense how this approach mirrors emotional awareness. When you notice tension building early, you can soften it. Stretch. Breathe. Adjust posture. When tension is noticed only at the breaking point, relief feels abrupt and disruptive. The earth behaves the same way. Early signals offer a chance to respond gently rather than react suddenly. In earthquake preparedness, even seconds can matter. Not because they allow escape, but because they allow transition. Elevators can stop. Machines can shut down safely. People can move away from hazards. More importantly, systems can shift from normal operation into readiness. This shift reduces chaos. It replaces surprise with response. You feel how calming this idea is. That safety does not always come from stopping events. Sometimes it comes from meeting them with awareness. Quantum sensing contributes to this by extending the window of awareness. By noticing changes earlier than traditional instruments can. These early signals are not alarms ringing in the night. They are quiet taps on the shoulder. They say, something is changing. Pay attention. This gentle language respects both the earth and those who live upon it. You imagine a future where early signals are woven seamlessly into daily life. Not as constant alerts. Not as sources of anxiety. But as background awareness. Like weather forecasts that inform without alarming. Like sunrise light gradually brightening a room. You sense how trust is essential here. Trust in the instruments. Trust in interpretation. Trust that information will be used wisely. This trust grows slowly. It is earned through consistency, transparency, and humility. Quantum sensors do not claim perfection. They acknowledge uncertainty openly. They offer probability, not prophecy. This honesty makes their gift of time feel genuine. Time offered without false promises is more valuable than certainty that cannot be delivered. You reflect on how fear often comes from feeling rushed, from feeling unprepared, from being surprised by forces larger than yourself. Early signals soften this experience. They do not remove danger. They remove shock. This changes how communities experience earthquakes. From sudden interruptions to anticipated transitions. The earth still moves. Energy still releases. But the emotional landscape shifts. Preparedness becomes calm rather than frantic. Response becomes coordinated rather than chaotic. You imagine sensors quietly listening beneath cities and along fault lines. They notice patterns emerging. They communicate these patterns gently to monitoring systems. Nothing dramatic happens most of the time. The earth adjusts. Stress redistributes. Life continues. And then, occasionally, signals align. Changes persist. Patterns strengthen. Awareness grows. This awareness does not demand immediate action. It invites attention. It gives time for systems to prepare, for people to become mentally ready. Mental readiness is powerful. When the mind is prepared, the body follows calmly. You feel how this aligns with the rhythm of sleep. When you drift gradually, dreams emerge softly. When sleep arrives suddenly, it can feel disorienting. Early signals allow the world to drift rather than jolt. They transform suddenness into sequence. This transformation is the true gift of time. Not more minutes. Not guaranteed outcomes. But continuity. A sense that events unfold rather than erupt. As you rest with this idea, you sense how deeply human it is. To seek not control, but understanding. To want not certainty, but preparation. Quantum sensing offers this quietly, patiently. It stands between ignorance and prediction, offering awareness as a middle path. As this chapter moves toward its close, a final thought settles gently in your mind. If time itself can be offered as a gift through early signals, then perhaps the next question is not how much we can know, but how we learn to trust science without demanding certainty from a living, changing Earth. You enter this chapter by letting go of a quiet expectation. The expectation that science should always know exactly what will happen next. That it should deliver certainty, clarity, and answers shaped like guarantees. Tonight, science asks something gentler of you. It asks to be trusted without being forced to predict. The Earth is not a machine with a fixed schedule. It is a living system, layered, complex, and always adjusting. No single measurement can capture it fully. No model can remove all uncertainty. This is not a weakness. It is an honest reflection of reality. Quantum sensing embraces this honesty. It does not pretend to see the future. It observes the present with extraordinary care. You begin to sense the difference between prediction and understanding. Prediction wants a date, a time, an outcome. Understanding wants context, patterns, and relationships. Understanding says, this is how things are unfolding. Science, at its most grounded, does not shout conclusions. It listens. It compares. It waits. Uncertainty here is not an error to eliminate. It is a space where information still lives. You imagine uncertainty not as darkness, but as twilight. Shapes are visible, though edges remain soft. Movement is detectable, even if direction is not final. Quantum sensors operate comfortably in this twilight. They measure probabilities. They track variations. They reveal trends rather than destinies. This approach requires a shift in trust. Trust not in exact answers, but in continuous observation. You feel how this mirrors emotional wisdom. When you notice feelings without demanding immediate resolution, they soften. When you force certainty, tension grows. The Earth responds similarly. Demanding exact predictions from a complex planet creates frustration. Accepting gradual insight creates cooperation. Quantum sensing teaches patience. It shows that knowledge accumulates through repetition, through consistency, through time. A single signal means little on its own. Many signals over time form meaning. This is why trust in science grows slowly. Not through dramatic claims, but through reliability. You sense how deeply human this desire for certainty is. Certainty feels safe. It feels solid. But false certainty is fragile. When it breaks, fear rushes in. Science that admits uncertainty builds a different kind of safety. A safety based on honesty. Quantum sensors do not promise to stop earthquakes. They do not claim to predict exact moments. They offer something quieter. They offer clarity about conditions. Is stress increasing? Is it easing? Are patterns changing or remaining stable? These questions do not demand absolute answers. They guide awareness. You feel how this guidance reduces fear. Fear thrives in the unknown, but it also thrives in broken promises. Trust grows when expectations are aligned with reality. Science becomes a companion rather than an authority. Walking beside the earth rather than standing above it. This companionship feels important. It removes the pressure to be perfect. It allows learning to continue. Quantum sensing is still young. Its instruments are improving. Its interpretations evolving. This openness is not a flaw. It is an invitation to refine understanding together. You imagine scientists listening not just to data, but to one another. Comparing results. Questioning assumptions. Adjusting interpretations. This process mirrors the earth itself. Always adjusting. Never static. Trust, in this context, is not blind belief. It is confidence built on transparency. You trust science not because it claims certainty, but because it shows its work. Because it acknowledges limits. Because it adapts when new information appears. This trust allows early signals to be used wisely. Not as panic triggers. Not as absolute warnings. But as context for decision-making. Communities can prepare without fear. Systems can respond without chaos. Uncertainty remains, but it is no longer frightening. It becomes part of the process. You feel how calming this realization is. That not knowing everything does not mean knowing nothing. That partial understanding can still guide meaningful action. The earth does not owe certainty. It offers patterns. Science does not promise control. It offers insight. Together, they create a relationship based on respect. As you breathe slowly, you notice how this chapter softens the urge to demand answers. It replaces that urge with curiosity. What is changing? How is it changing? What does that suggest? These questions invite listening rather than judgment. Quantum sensing fits naturally into this mindset. It thrives on comparison rather than absolutes. On trends rather than endpoints. You sense how this approach aligns with sleep itself. You do not demand exact dreams. You allow them to emerge. Rest comes not from control, but from trust. Trust that your body knows how to sleep. Trust that your mind will wander safely. In the same way, trust that science can listen responsibly. As this chapter settles, you feel a quiet peace in uncertainty. Not emptiness. Not ignorance. But openness. The earth continues its slow processes. Sensors continue listening. Understanding continues growing. And as you drift toward rest, one final thought lingers softly. If trust allows us to live calmly with uncertainty, then perhaps the deepest comfort comes from knowing that even while you sleep, the planet beneath you is being listened to patiently, humbly, and without demanding it reveal everything at once. You come back to the place where this journey began, your own quiet body resting on the earth. The room around you is dim. Your breath is slow. Your thoughts, once busy, are now soft and rhythmic. You realize that the earth is not separate from you. You are part of the same living system. Your body rests on the crust. Your heartbeat shares the same space as the planet's deep pulses. Your breath matches the slow pace of tectonic motion. This connection is not poetic in a vague way. It is physical. It is real. It is the most intimate form of belonging. You may not feel the Earth's motion directly, but you feel its effects in subtle ways. The firmness beneath you, the warmth of the ground, the sense of being held. This holding is gravity's gift, a gentle anchor that keeps you grounded. And now you understand that the Earth is not only holding you, it is being heard. Across landscapes and laboratories, instruments listen with patience. Quantum sensors sit quietly, not to control the planet, but to understand it. They do not demand drama. They do not seek to frighten. They simply observe. The Earth continues its slow conversations. Vibrations ripple through stone like whispers. Gravity shifts like a soft curve in space. Fault lines breathe like a patient being holding tension for a long time. Even when the planet seems calm, it is not silent. It is speaking in ways that only careful listening can catch. You feel comforted by this. Not because it removes danger, but because it removes loneliness. You are not alone on this planet. The Earth is alive with processes. And humanity is learning to listen, gently and respectfully. This is a form of guardianship that does not rely on force. It relies on attention, on humility, on the willingness to learn. You imagine the networks of sensors beneath cities, across mountains, and along coastlines. They are like quiet guardians, watching without intruding. Not like eyes. Like ears. They do not see. They listen. And while you sleep, they continue their work. Not in frantic urgency, but in calm consistency. This consistency is the real strength of science. It does not need to be loud to be effective. It simply needs to be steady. You feel how this steadiness mirrors your own sleep. Sleep is not a single event. It is a process, a gradual descent, a series of stages. Just like the Earth's processes. Stress builds slowly. Energy releases gradually. Patterns unfold over time. You begin to think of the planet as a watchful presence, not a distant force, but a living system that continues to evolve while you rest. This awareness does not create anxiety. It creates care, a gentle respect for the world beneath your feet. You realize that preparing for earthquakes is not about fear. It is about understanding, about living with the Earth's rhythms rather than against them. Quantum sensing is one way humans practice this understanding. It offers deeper listening. earlier signals, better awareness. But it also offers something more subtle. It offers a relationship with the planet based on patience, a relationship where the Earth is not an enemy to be controlled, but a companion to be heard. As you drift deeper, the idea of a watchful planet becomes a lullaby. A calm reminder that the world is not indifferent. It is attentive. And you are part of that attention. Your presence matters. Your awareness matters. Even if you do not fully understand everything, you can still be present. You rest, knowing that the Earth continues its quiet work. You rest, knowing that science listens with care. You rest, knowing that the planet's deepest conversations happen long before they become visible. And as your mind settles into sleep, one final thought lingers softly, like a distant echo of a whisper you can barely hear. The Earth keeps listening long before it ever speaks, and so do you.